Hi everyone, this is Yume. Welcome to my third ever voiceover tutorial. Each month on Patreon, people can vote on which of the many video processes gets turned into a tutorial. And this month they chose the painting Come Find Me. In past tutorials, I showed various ways to paint architecture and people from scratch, and also incorporating architecture from 3D models. In this tutorial, I'll talk about how you can turn a photograph into a painting. I started with this photo I took in Hong Kong, and I chose this photo because I liked the composition with the street crossing lines that gives the image a lot of dynamic angles, as well as all the buildings, also the way the perspective lines fade into the distance and creates this triangular shape. I didn't record this part, but then I went into Lightroom and adjusted a lot of the colors and clarity of the photo, so you can see that it ended up looking quite different. I'm not going to give a tutorial on how to use Lightroom or photo editing because there's already a lot of existing tutorials out there for that, and that's how I learned. So if you're interested in learning how to use Lightroom, you can just Google for Lightroom tutorials, and that'll give you some better foundations to paint over the photo. It brings out a lot more details than you originally see in the raw version. When painting with photos as a base, you want to bring out the best of the photograph and also add your own touch to it. In this case, I really like the triangular shape created by the two buildings and the street, but I felt like it can look even better as a more circular shape to give it that almost dizzying swirl of the city night. And to do that, I use a combination of Photoshop's warp tool, which I use first to give the overall image a change in the general perspective, and then I go into the liquify tool to touch up on some smaller areas that the warp tool couldn't get properly. Once I'm happy with the rounded composition of the photo, I can now focus on the details. And a great shortcut I like to use from changing the photo look into a painted look is to use this program called Filter Forge, or plugin called Filter Forge. This program offers some more advanced filters than the ones that Photoshop offers, and the thing that I like is it lets users create their own filters, and you can also upload your filters onto their website and share with other people. So the filter I use here is actually a free one that I got off of the website called Sketchy Paint. The downside of this program is that it's really slow. It takes like 15 to 30 minutes to finish rendering a picture. It's sped up here, of course. And the other downside is that it has some size limitations, so I had to actually cut this photo in half before running it through the Filter Forge filters. But I still, at the end of the day, it saves a lot of time from painting over the entire photo by hand. And here I'm trying out different setting adjustments in Filter Forge, such as the color and the brushstroke size. Like right now, the brushstrokes are way too big and lose too much detail. So if you turn up the detail settings, it'll give you more details. So after a long time, the program is finished rendering and you get this fully filtered image that has these paintbrush-like strokes everywhere. And it already looks pretty good, but there's still a lot of areas that look a bit strange and just too much repetitive texture, and I mean that's understandable considering this is just a filter program. Then going back into Filter Forge, I'm using a different filter now called Edge Detector, and this will give me a rough idea of some line art. It's not a perfect line art because it's not a 3D render or hand-drawn one, but it's still pretty good and saves a lot of time. And when the line art is first added over the painted looking image, you can't really see it much at first, but when we go into painting in the actual details, it'll be more useful then. Now I'm using Photoshop's Cutout Filter to create all these flat comic-like colors. I like to use as many filters as I can to give myself lots of options, because when you have a lot of filters layered over each other, you can see which ones have imperfections in which area and which ones look better in some other areas. And then I just erase the parts that I don't like to reveal the areas that I do like underneath it. And just do this many times with many different types of filters, and then you'll get a pretty good looking painting like work that's actually not a painting. But of course we will be doing some painting later on to adding all the extra artistic touch. Once I have finished adding different filters to the photo, it's time to do some color adjustments. And I already did a lot of color adjustments in Lightroom to the raw photo, so now it's just some tiny extra changes here and there. Like I wanted the sky to have more of a green tinge, so I added a bit more of that. Now I switch over to Paint Tool side to begin the painting process, and switching to side is just a personal preference. You can keep painting in Photoshop if you want. I begin accentuating the existing neon signs that's very characteristic to Hong Kong, and I do that by creating a new layer, setting it to luminosity and then or shine for the newer version of Psy, and then just painting the colors bright pink or magenta or red for all the neon signs that are bright red. That gives it that more intense glow that's kind of more surreal looking. And I also adding some blue haze here and there to contrast with the bright red and pink neons. The blues are not from the neon lights, but more of a rainy, foggy feel. When the extra lights are added and the whole image becomes lighter, you'll see more of the line art and some of the flaws in the line art because it's just a filter. And so I go and erase some parts that I think doesn't look as good, and those are usually areas that has just too much detail, generally where the people are or where the window where the buildings have a lot of windows. Too much detail makes the whole entire area just pure line art and gets too dark, so I am erasing some of those. I generally keep the line art that outlines the city's silhouette, and that helps give it that extra sense of shape and contrast. And especially when I'm painting over the image later on, if I forget where I painted before, the line art will help me remember if I paint out of bounds. Now for the fun part, which is painting over the photo, I always do this on a new layer in case I make some mistakes or change my mind, and then it doesn't affect the original photo underneath it. I pick a textured brush that looks similar to what the Filter Forge sketchy paint filter has created, and then just add in more details to where I think will look good, such as more reflections and outlines of the girl in the front of her phone, more neon lights reflecting off the umbrellas and such. When working with a photo, it's easy to feel like it's already complete because a photo is complete by itself. But if that's the case, then there's almost no point in doing this. So you really want to be creative and let your mind go a bit more free and try to imagine something different from the photo and bring out your own vision. But it's also important to keep in mind the existing details of the photo and what's great about the existing details and preserve some of those. If it's only about your imaginative vision that has nothing to do with the photo, then you could have just painted from scratch and not even bother with the photo either. So the key is to work together, balance out your own imagination with what you have, and utilize the best of both. For example, I really like the look of a raining city night In the actual photo, it was raining a little bit, but not much. You can see most of the people didn't use an umbrella, and you couldn't really see the rain itself in the photo. So I decided to add some of my own rain, and I took a brush and accentuated all of the reflections. And when it rains in real life and things get wet, they tend to become shinier and more reflective. So I'm adding more lights and reflections to the street, to the umbrellas, and to a lot of the neon signs and surfaces. This way I'm utilizing something that's already in the photo, but also giving it my own artistic touch, creating this dreamy, rainy haze look. With the rainy theme in mind, you want to make sure that the entire image is consistent with that change, since the original photo is not as rainy. The one thing I really painted over is the sky. I added a lot of storm clouds. I gave it a flowing, thundery feel, like the storm is rolling in. Now it's just touching up on some of the details. Since this is just a filtered photo, some areas the details get lost, gets blurred. I'm gonna go back and paint that in, make sure it's clear and vibrant, especially in areas you want to focus on. You can let the details go in some of the other areas in the distance where the eyes don't need to focus. And also, I decided to give everybody umbrellas. I feel like the umbrellas that covers everyone's face and their heads gives the whole image a more mysterious and ominous feel to it, especially with the theme of a little girl lost in the city and everyone is a stranger. You don't see their faces and they're all covered and hiding under their own lives, their own mysteries. I also decided to make the yellow lines of the crossroad more swirly and curves up more than it should in real life, and in a very surreal way that cuts into the buildings behind it. It's almost as if there will be an endless flood of people crossing the street, swirling in from the side. It's these surreal details that really breaks this painting from the original photo that it was painted over. And as the streets are painted, you can feel that the image is coming together as its own thing, as opposed to what it was based on. Now it's just going back and adding more details to things that I missed earlier, adding more reflections to the buildings, giving details to everybody's umbrellas, and so on. I also added some shadows into everyone's reflections on the street, and as well as some antennas on top of the building to give it a more ominous look. This part of the painting takes the longest, and it's just a lot of repetitive tasks. A little reflection here, a little shading there, but it's also very relaxing. You kind of get into the flow and let your mind go blank. And then for the final touch, I wanted to add a little girl who is lost without an umbrella in this raining city. And she appears in a lot of my other paintings with raining cities. And I think I like to draw her a lot because when I was a child, about her age, I actually was kidnapped by part of my family. My mom's side and my dad's side of the family didn't get along, so one side kidnapped me from the other side, and I was lost trying to find my way back home for a while. So a lot of my images draws experiences from my past and my childhood. And when I'm mostly done painting the little girl, I decided to highlight her presence by painting the areas around her with extra reflections and this glowing aura that seems unnatural, even in the context of this already unnatural image. I wanted the glow to make her feel like she doesn't really belong in that world, almost as if she's a ghost. And then finally I go back into Photoshop and I run the image through some filters and some color balance to adjust the colors, just to see what it will look like. I might not even like the look, and then I can just Ctrl-Z, but it doesn't hurt to try out a few different things to see if you'll happen to like the outcome. And that's it. That's how I turned this photo I took in Hong Kong into this painting. Thank you again everyone for watching this video. I hope you guys will enjoy exploring the different techniques of painting and utilizing 3D programs and photography in your art. If you like this tutorial and you want to see more, you can vote on which of my paintings will be turned into the next tutorial on my Patreon.